Welcome everyone to our information session for cohort 2 of i.d.e.a Fund. This is our first information session for cohort 2. So you will notice that there are lots of folks on the call today joining us, which is wonderful. We have about 100 people here today. Please note that this session will be recorded and posted publicly on our i.d.e.a Fund website, and a link to our website will be posted in the chat box for you sometime during today's session by one of my colleagues. We are also happy to welcome our ASL interpreters from Assign today. Their names are Tanya and Francine. We've made them co-hosts. They should be towards the top of your screen, so you can pin or spotlight them if you require ASL interpretation. We have also enabled the Zoom auto caption function, and you can turn this on and off with the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. I will take a quick moment to introduce myself. I'm Jordan Hunsberger. I'm Program Manager for i.d.e.a Fund, and I work at Innovation Guelph. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Diana Train and Adelaide Manley. They both have the i.d.e.a Fund Zoom backgrounds on, or you can find them by their name. They're going to help me manage our attendees and our volume levels here today to make sure everyone can always hear me or always see our interpreters. And you can also message them if you have any technical difficulties. They can try to help you out if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. So as you might have heard, today's session is for i.d.e.a Fund, and i.d.e.a Fund is a program that's delivered through 6 different regional innovation centers. I will mention them in a couple slides. But some of those folks are on the call with us today. So you might see some other i.d.e.a Fund team members on the call too, but I'll be delivering the content today. And we'll explain all of this in more detail in our relationship and how we all work together in a couple slides. So let's get started. Before we start today, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. While the i.d.e.a Fund is delivered through 6 partners across Southern Ontario, this information session is specifically being delivered from Guelph, Ontario, so we would like to give recognition to the land that Guelph is on. We acknowledge that many others here today might be on different territory, so we invite and encourage you to give recognition to the land you occupy today and every day. As we gather for today's session, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As an organization, we have a responsibility for the stewardship on the land of which we live and work. And today we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. So the purpose of this information session is to give you an overview of i.d.e.a Fund and take you through the important process during the application period. So we will focus pretty heavily on the application process in the second half of today's info session, and then we'll have some Q&A as well. So I have a lot to cover today, and we have, again, over 100 people on the call joining us today. And we learned some tips and tricks from the last time we ran these info sessions for cohort 1. So it will be easiest for myself to cover all of the material today and to get to as many questions as possible. If I'm able to deliver the content up front, I'll take about 40 to 45 minutes to do that. And then after that, we will open up the floor for open Q&A, and we'll rotate between questions asked in the chat box and those who have their hands raised to ask a question out loud. That way I can make sure all of the content is covered for folks that can't stay for the entire call, and we dedicate lots of time for Q&A. If your question doesn't get answered by the end of today's call, there'll be a link to my email in the chat box, and I welcome you to email me directly. I'd be happy to chat with you one-on-one to make sure your question's answered, but we will get to as many questions as possible. And some of your questions might be answered throughout the presentation as well. So that said, I'll kindly ask that you hold your questions to the end, and then my friends Adelaide and Diana will rotate between addressing questions in the chat box and those who want to ask their question out loud. And really appreciate you respecting this process so we can get through all of the content today and make it beneficial for everybody who's on the call. So I'll get into it now. So i.d.e.a Fund is a program that fosters inclusion, diversity, environment, and acceleration while contributing to a green recovery. It provides a non-repayable grant, which we termed seed funding, and executive level mentorship to support these objectives. So overall, this program will support a more sustainable economy while fostering inclusive and equitable recovery in Southern Ontario. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, the IDEA Fund is a program that is funded by the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, also referred to as FedDev Ontario, through the Jobs and Growth Fund, and it is delivered in partnership through 6 different regional innovation centers, which are Innovation Guelph, Haltech, Innovate Niagara, We Tech Alliance, Innovation Factory, and Tech Alliance of Southwestern Ontario. So I know people are curious what that means for the application process, and I will mention what our relationship with each innovation center and how we work together means when you apply to the program. So our program guide outlines the eligibility criteria, which I encourage you to visit on our website, read the program guide and kind of grasp that information before you apply, but I'll list it here. So to be eligible for the IDEA Fund program, your business must be based in Southern Ontario. You must have business operations out of Southern Ontario. On the program guide, there is a list of all the counties that are considered Southern Ontario, and there are also some links to maps that you can view as well if that's easier to determine if your business is in Southern Ontario as classified by our funder for this program. And the next eligibility criteria is you must be available to complete project requirements. So if you have travel planned throughout the IDEA Fund period, which will be June to the end of November 2023, make sure that that's aligned for you to complete the program requirements. It is a seed funding plus mentorship program. So there's just to be mindful of your time commitments. So you also, your business must be incorporated federally or in Ontario by June 1st, 2023. So if you aren't incorporated yet and you're intending to apply, you'll be asked on the application if you are incorporated or if you're planning to be by June 1st. And that you'll have to say yes to those questions to proceed to the application form. Your business also must have a scalable product or service. So scalability is defined differently by different people, but our definition of scalability is the company is able to increase revenue and market expansion while increasing efficiencies. So the most important thing is that your company cannot be a pure service business company. For example, a real estate office, an accounting firm. You have to have a scalable product or service to be a fit for this program and to be eligible. Your business must have between 1 and 499 employees. In other words, less than 500 employees to participate. A frequently asked question is whether there's a minimum or maximum revenue to be eligible for the program. The answer is no. There's no revenue requirement to apply to IDEA Fund. No specific requirement there, but you will be asked on the application form to explain the impact that the seed funding grant will have on your business. And of course, the impact will look different from company to company, depending on the stage of your business that you're applying with. Now is also a good time for me to mention that if you're attending this call and your business, you participated in cohort 1 of IDEA Fund, you cannot participate again. So just wanted to say that earlier on in the interest of your time, cohort 1 participants, those businesses are not eligible for cohort 2. Now I'm going to talk about the core program components. So we will be accepting 240 businesses between cohorts 1 and 2. So we had 117 companies participate through cohort 1 of the program. So if you are accepted into cohort 2, you will be supported through seed funding and mentorship to execute a project proposed on your application. So accepted businesses will be supported through seed funding of up to $30,000 with matching funds. And I'll speak to what that matching funds means in the next slide. So on the application form, you will have an opportunity to indicate how much seed funding you're requesting, which again is up to $30,000. There is no advantage to requesting less than $30,000. If you have the ability to match the funds at the maximum amount and you have a project that will be supported by those, we encourage you to request $30,000. A frequently asked question is, will my application be scored better if I'm asking for less funding? No, we encourage you to ask for $30,000 if you are in a position to carry out a project at $30,000. And the other component of the project or the program is you'll receive up to 40 hours of targeted support and expertise from business leaders. So each regional innovation center uses a bit different terminology. You might hear mentor, you might hear advisor, you might hear EIR. But that's the targeted support you can receive from each regional innovation center. And I'll talk a little bit more about the types of projects that might be a good fit for this program in the slides to come. I just wanted to quickly pause. I know some people have joined us and throughout the intro here. So we are just holding questions until the second half of the presentation, and just wanted to say that as a reminder. So now I will talk about the seed funding piece. On the previous slide, I mentioned that seed funding must be matched for this program. So again, you can request up to $30,000, and you are required to match the funds requested at 1-to-1. So if you are requesting $30,000, that means you must have proof that you can match that $30,000 with $30,000, making it a $60,000 project. Now, a part of the program and our efforts to reduce financial barriers and provide more equity in the program is that underrepresented groups are not required to match the funds at 1-to-1. They're required to match them at 25%. So the underrepresented groups for i.d.e.a Fund have been defined by our funder, and they fall into the following 5 categories. So if you self-identify as Black, Indigenous, person of color, LGBTQ2+, or a person with a disability, you are classified as an underrepresented business for this program, and you can match the funds at 25%. I'll go into detail about what this means on the application form in a couple of slides, but those are the matching requirements for the program. So in that case, if you self-identified as an underrepresented person on the application, your maximum project amount would be $37,500. Another frequently asked question here is, can we do a project for more than 60,000 or more than 37,500? You can, and I'll talk about what that would look like in terms of putting that information on the application form as well, because there's a budget section that we'll go over. You can do that, but in terms of what the requirement is for i.d.e.a Fund, those are the 2 project amounts. So these are just the kind of examples in writing that I just talked about. So for founders matching 1-to-1, you're going to match $30,000 or whatever amount of seed funding you request at 1-to-1. This would make your project $60,000. For our people who are self-identifying as an underrepresented founder, you are requesting $75 or $30,000. You're matching that at 25%, which is $7,500, making your total project cost $37,500. So we wanted to provide some information about how the seed funding disbursement works, because this could kind of help you determine if you're ready to apply to a program like this. So for i.d.e.a Fund, the seed funding is dispersed in 3 different installments. So the first installment is 50% of the seed funding. So if you've requested $30,000, you'll get $15,000 upfront, and this is dispersed at the beginning of your project. So there are some due diligence process that you'll be informed of if you were accepted into the program. After all of that is finished, before you get started with your project, you're given half upfront. The second installment is 25%, the next 25%. So if you're requesting the full amount, you're getting $7,500. This is dispersed when approximately 50% of the money you are contributing and received is spent, and approximately 50% of your project is complete. So upfront, you get the $15,000. You're expected to spend that plus your matching portion for that piece to get you to the halfway mark, and then we can evaluate your project and you would receive the next 25%. The third installment, I will say, is technically a reimbursement. So the final 25% of seed funding, so again, $7,500 if you're matching the seed funding, or if you've requested the full amount, you have to be completely spent. So you have to have spent either the $60,000 project amount, or for the other group, $37,500, and your project has to be approximately complete. So, of course, situations arise, and that would be discussed with your program team if you're accepted into the program. But you do need to be prepared if you're applying to this program to fully spend the last piece of your project before you get that last 25% of seed funding. So we emphasize that because it was a frequently asked question as well last time. So consider the third installment technically a reimbursement after you're complete. So I mentioned I would have a slide with just a couple of project types and examples. This is not an exhaustive list. So your project could look a bit different than these examples, but for people who are still thinking about what they could apply to this program with, this might help. So I'll just mention a few. We have business management and strategy. Your project could be focused on leadership training. Maybe you have talent recruitment efforts you need to do. Maybe it's very marketing focused. So you could have a branding and marketing project that both the seed funding and mentorship are supporting you with. You could be developing a new product. You could be doing B2B sales and business development. You could be doing investment readiness and preparation. So this slide is meant to show you that the project opportunities are broad, and as long as your costs fall within eligible costs on our program guide, which is available on our website, then you're welcome to apply with that project idea. So as I mentioned, excuse me, as I mentioned at the beginning, a major focus of i.d.e.a Fund is on a sustainable green recovery. So an aspect of your project should include this. You will see questions on the application form that ask, will you be developing new or redesigning green products, services, processes, or technologies that will have a positive impact on the environment? So this is the main question that you will see, that you will answer in terms of that will communicate the green recovery aspect of your project. So this could be within your organization, you're implementing something new or redesigning something within your organization, or your business could be structured to provide a solution for another organization. Both are acceptable. It just depends on the nature of your business. I will say that throughout cohort 1 application process to now, we've received the most questions about this piece on the application process. I get a lot of questions like, is this green enough for my application to be successful? Which is a tricky question to answer because everyone's applications are going to look a lot different. So for some businesses, green recovery is at the very heart of what they do, and for others, it's not. So they're applying to i.d.e.a Fund for support to implement something that will help them have a positive impact on the environment. So it would be impossible for us to say whether your specific green recovery aspect will make your application more successful than others, as it is a competitive application process. But if you have specific questions about the type of project you'd like to apply with, let's connect offline via email or a phone call, and I can help you work through that. Again, I'll never be able to offer a guarantee, but I'd be happy to help through that process. So we'll talk a little bit about the expert support in more detail. So the minimum amount of mentorship that businesses are required to access if you are accepted into i.d.e.a Fund is 20 hours, and the maximum is 40 hours. So there may be an opportunity, if you were accepted, to involve more than one expert, and each Regional Innovation Center has a different roster of mentors, advisors, and there may be an opportunity to involve more than one person to support you with these hours, depending on what your project needs are. So if you're applying to i.d.e.a fund with the intent to just take the seed funding and then execute your project completely solo, this is probably not the program for you, because there is a lot of engagement that is required with your mentor and project management and other things that we'd like you to work with your mentor on throughout the program. Mentorship is a key piece to consider in that case when you're applying. So as I said, each regional innovation center has a roster of their own mentors and advisors, and all of that information would be communicated to you if you were accepted into the program. So once you are accepted, your mentor will also help you develop project plan with milestones and KPIs, as well as your project budget. So you'll see in a few slides that on the application form, you are required to complete a budget, a high-level budget. That's the budget that would be provided to your mentor if you were accepted to refine, get more concrete and specific on your activities. So your mentor will help you through that process as well, and goal setting throughout the program. So now I'm going to take you through the application process. We have a couple slides there, and then we'll open it up for Q&A after. So appreciate everyone holding their questions until that period and during the second half. So applying to i.d.e.a fund. Application forms are now live on the SurveyMonkey Apply website, and you can find that link on the Central i.d.e.a Fund website that one of my colleagues will post in the chat box toward the end of today's session if they haven't already. SM Apply is the portal that we use. It allows us to collect applications from people all over Southern Ontario. So the process is click on that link. If you've already applied to i.d.e.a Fund, or if you have already applied to another program with SurveyMonkey Apply, then you already have credentials to log in and your email is probably already verified. If you've never used SM Apply before, you'll have to create an account. You'll have to verify your email, and then you'll be ready to apply. So once you navigate to that page, create your account, you'll be able to log in. Then you'll see a message, please verify your account via email. You'll get an email to the email that you used when you applied. Once you click verify, you're good to go. So first, when you come to the i.d.e.a Fund website, and this might look different depending on if you have applied to cohort 1 before. So for people who are returning applicants, your eligibility criteria is saved in your SM Apply portal. So you'll be allowed to proceed right to the application form unless you've cleared your portal or cleared your data, which is something you'd have to do very intentionally. So unless you've done that, your eligibility answers from last time were probably saved and you can proceed right to the form. If you haven't applied before, you'll have to complete a short eligibility quiz. And this is just kind of a check before you proceed and spend a lot of time on the application just to make sure that you are indeed eligible to apply. So you'll see the same eligibility questions that we talked about before. Are you based in Southern Ontario? It'll have a direct link for you to a map that shows you the counties. Are you available from June 2023 to December 2023? So that's the project period. Is your business incorporated? And do you have a scalable product or service? The incorporated question, if you answer no here, another question will pop up that says, do you have plans to incorporate by June 2023? So you can be honest if you're not incorporated right now and say no, and then answer that question yes, and then you can proceed to the application form still. So after you complete the eligibility form, so you've created an account, you've logged in, you've verified your email, and you completed your eligibility quiz, you will see the 5 sections that are required for the i.d.e.a Fund application that are pictured here on the right of my screen. The first 4 are required, and then the last section called supporting documentation is an optional section that'll go into more detail in a couple slides. So we will briefly review each of these sections above. I'm not going to go through every page of the application. If you have questions about specific things on the application form, you can always get in touch with me, but I'll briefly cover each section. I did want to note that there is a PDF version of the application form available for download on the SM Apply site that you can download and access before applying if you are somebody who likes to be prepared before you start an application form. I know I am. That's why we made it available. So once you log into SM Apply, you'll see a list of things that are available for you to review before you start applying. So just wanted to mention that. It is important to note, though, that all applications must be submitted through the SM Apply portal, and that's due to the way we review applications, so that PDF is just for viewing purposes only. The other thing I wanted to note here is you won't see the budget section, so you'll see that on my screen beneath Business Model Canvas here. You won't see that right away because the budget you're shown is based on how you answer the questions in the company information section. So if you are not self-identifying as an underrepresented group, then you'll be shown that standard budget, the one-to-one matching budget. And if you do self-identify, then you'll be shown the 25% matching budget. So you won't see that until you get this green check mark beside company information and that whole section's complete. Then it'll know which budget to show you. So the company information tab on the i.d.e.a fund application includes 4 pages of questions, 4 short pages. And these questions include, but are not limited to, general business information. So your company name, your address, the names of the primary contacts, your business industry. You'll be asked about investment information. Has your business received any investments, and intellectual property information? Just to name a few. There are a couple more questions, including that question, do you belong to one of the underrepresented groups? And again, we ask that just so we can show you the proper budget and you get the right matching requirement there. If you have applied to cohort 1 of i.d.e.a Fund and you're applying for cohort 2, you will have the option to reuse the data that you inputted only on this company information section. So here's the prompt that will pop up. When you click on company information, it'll say reuse data. You have previously completed this task. Would you like to reuse the data? And then it'll show you the date that you applied last. And overwrite any data I have already added to this task will be automatically clicked. So I would strongly recommend you clicking add data and reusing it because you have access to edit any of it that you'd like. So if anything, it'll just save you some time populating questions and answers that haven't changed. So if your address information, any other information in this section that hasn't changed, you could save some time. But you can edit it if you need to. If you click cancel, there is a section at the top of the company information form that you can get this pop-up to come back for you and click add data if you click cancel out of this screen, but this will pop up right away. If you didn't apply to cohort 1, you will not see this prompt and you'll have to fill in the application form in its entirety since you didn't do it last time. After company information is complete, you'll see the i.d.e.a Fund questions section, and it includes 3 pages of questions. Again, 3 short pages. These questions dive deeper into the specifics of the program and include questions such as the amount of seed funding that you're seeking. So that's up front. How much seed funding are you applying for? Your intent for the seed funding. So what are you using it for? Your target market, your company's focus on green initiatives. So those green recovery questions we talked about. And there's a few other questions on here for you as well. This section is also where you will indicate your history working with the 6 partnered regional innovation centers. So at the end of this section, you'll see a question that says, have you worked with one of these regional innovation centers? And if you click one of them in particular, that's where your application will be assigned to be sorted for the review process. So when you apply to the program, each regional innovation center has their own teams reviewing applications based on the same rubric. And I will mention in a couple slides where you can find that rubric since we give you access to it. So if you click Innovation Guelph, for example, or if you click Haltech, you'll be sorted to that regional innovation center for them to grade your application. If you haven't worked with a regional innovation center before, that's totally fine. Or if you've worked with one that's not a part of this program, also completely fine. You can just click none of the above, and then you'll be sorted based on two scenarios. So if you are in a county that is in one of the catchment areas for the Regional Innovation Center, you'll be sorted to that center. If you're outside the catchment area with your county, but you're still in Southern Ontario, since each Regional Innovation Center supports a couple counties around their centers, you'll be sorted randomly to one of the 6 centers. So again, if this is something you're concerned about and you want to make sure your application goes to the center you've worked with before, this section is where you'll answer that question right at the very end of this section. The next section beneath idea fund questions is a business model canvas. So I'll explain a bit more detail about the business model canvas for folks who haven't created one before. A business model canvas is a visual tool intended for developing new or documenting existing business models. It quickly informs us how your organization or business creates its products or services, delivers them, and captures value, for an example, with your customers or revenue. You can think of the business model canvas as containing 9 essential building blocks, and each segment of this tool builds on the next to create the best picture of how your business operates. I'll go through each section briefly and provide some examples, just so you're clear on how to complete it. But then I'll also reference where you can find a business model canvas guide that dives even deeper into how to complete this on the SM Apply website. So the building blocks on your business model canvas that you might want to consider are key partners, key activities, key resources, customer relationships, customer segments and channels, and your value propositions, your cost structure, and your revenue streams. So these are all things that are asked on the business model canvas. So here you will take these key building blocks and create yours. And if you have an existing business model canvas and it's a supported file type, you can upload that directly to SM Apply as well. And if you don't, there's a template available for download right on this section. So if you're really unfamiliar with the business model canvas and you need some more support to complete it, when you first log into SM Apply, it's a business model canvas guide. It's a PowerPoint, and there's a PDF version as well. That guide dives deeper into each of these sections. So you'll see that within the list, there's the PDF of the application for download. We have our rubric present there, and also a business model canvas guide as well. And you can also find that guide linked on our FAQs as well, if you're looking for a different place to find it. So similar to the business model canvas, the budget upload section includes a template for download, and then you can upload that template back. So as I mentioned a few slides ago, you will need to provide a budget for what you intend to do with the seed funding that you're requesting, plus your matching funds. So there are 2 budget versions, one for those who self-identify as belonging to the underrepresented group. So you're matching the funds at 25%. And then the other version is the standard version, matching it at 1-to-1. So you will automatically be shown the budget appropriate for download based on how you answer that question, as I mentioned in the company information section. So this is what the screen will look like when you get to that point. So the next few slides, including this one, includes a couple of screenshots right from the budget. So I can walk you through how to complete this high-level budget. So this here is an example of a budget with a 1-to-1 match. The other version is identical, but the formulas are such that you're matching the funds at 25%. As you can see, there are a few examples that you can consider with the sufficient details that we would need you to include on your application. So these are very specific activities. So the overall activity is creating new packaging, biodegradable options to replace plastic materials. There's some staff training on this new packaging. So that's just an example to kind of get you thinking about how to complete this. If you applied to cohort 1 of IDEA Fund, you'll notice some changes on this budget sheet versus the last one. We have added an additional category called expense category. This was not on the previous version. And there's some pre-populated drop downs that you can choose from that are categories that your expense could fall under. Now, these are coded into the sheet, so it's important to note that you can't add your own category, but just kind of choose the one that best suits what activity that you're doing, and we'll be able to make sense of it. And then if you were brought into the program, we could edit this and further change it for you. You'll also see a legend to the right of my screen here that lists all those categories and then has some more information about maximum spend on particular categories, which you can also find in our program guide. So if you've reviewed that guide, you'll know that there is an expense cap on salary, labor, and benefits of 15% of your total project cost. So if you are completing a $60,000 project, it's capped at $9,000. Similarly, capital expenditure costs are capped at 25% of the maximum project cost. So for this program, it would be $15,000. If you exceed those caps on the budget sheet, it will tell you, and you can adjust them. And I'll show you that next here. So you'll see here, I've entered in $10,000 for labor, which is about $1,000 over the max. And it'll show you have exceeded the maximum spend for labor, salary, and benefits of $9,000. So then that will prompt you to go back and correct this in the sheet before you complete it and change it to the maximum. Same goes for capital expenditures costs. It'll show you that you've exceeded that maximum spend of 15,000, and this will, the formulas here make sense on the 25% matching budget as well with exact amounts. It looks the same, but has the accurate amounts for those project costs as well. If you exceed both, you'll see this message. You've exceeded the maximum spend for multiple categories. Please review eligible costs. And at this point, if you're confused and you're not sure where you should be looking, you can contact me and I can walk you through it. But these are just kind of some extra checkpoints to make sure that your budget is as clear as possible for our review team. Some other recommendations that I can provide for the budget is be as specific as you can with your expenses in terms of what you're putting on the budget sheet. So if you're able to share what type of marketing activity you're doing, for example, put that on the sheet. If you're not quite sure yet, just do the best you can, be as specific as possible. Of course, what you put on here might be quotes at this time. You might not have a concrete cost, but again, do the best you can. You'll also see on the bottom of the budget, so this is just like a zoomed in screenshot of the bottom of the budget sheet. You'll see a section that says client contribution over and above project costs. So toward the beginning of the session today, I mentioned that you are able to go up over and above the maximum project spend, and you can indicate that to us here. It's not required. It won't make your application more or less successful. But if you already know your project will be above $60,000 or above $37,500, you can kind of communicate that here saying, these are the extra things that I'll do with my own funds above and beyond the project. So this is an opportunity to put that in that section. You'll also see a section at the very bottom that might not make a whole lot of sense for you at this stage, but you're welcome to complete it if you can. It's called mentor support activity and hours. So if you have an idea of the types of activities that you might want mentorship support with, you can by all means put them here. You don't need to indicate a really specific activity. You do not need to estimate the number of hours here at this time. That will be more refined if you were accepted into the program. We would get those details down a bit better in terms of what you'd be receiving at that time if you were accepted. But just wanted to flag it because it is on the budget sheet and it might cause some confusion since it's a change from last time, from last cohort. So those sections are there as well. So this is the last section. And this is, if you remember, the optional section called supporting documentation. So the last section of the IDEA Fund application, you have the option to upload a 1 to 2 minute personal video or a pitch video describing your business and why you would like to participate. So some people in the past have submitted commercials that they've had done professionally. Some people filmed a video on their phone, just more articulation of their project. Either option is fine. You're totally welcome to do either of those things, or if you have links to other videos that have been done for your business, you can also upload a pitch deck or a individual file. I'll just mention for this section, there is no maximum for the number of uploads you can put here and the number of links, but just be cognizant that we have review teams that are reviewing everything. So 1 to 2 uploads might make more sense here than 10. We want to be mindful that the information that you'll be accepted based on will mostly fall in the sections previously, and this section should be used if you absolutely have something that you would like the review team to know and want to communicate on your project. And if you don't, then you don't even have to complete this. There were successful applications for cohort 1 that didn't have any supporting document uploads. So don't feel like you have to create something just for this section if you don't already have something. But if you do, please feel free to upload it here. So I did mention this before, but you're assigned to a regional innovation center, again, based on your working history. I'll just post a reminder, you do not have to have had worked with a regional innovation center before to be eligible for this fund, as long as you meet the other eligibility criteria, meaning located in Southern Ontario, you can match the funds, you have less than 500 employees, you have a scalable product or service. Those are the eligibility criteria. So if you haven't worked with a center, you'll be sorted based on your county or you'll be sorted randomly. If you have any questions about how this works, you can reach out to me and we can figure it out. There's also a section to indicate if you've worked with multiple regional innovation centers, and then we take that information back and discuss amongst our partners before we review your application. So we're almost at the question and answer period. These are just a couple other reminders. Before you apply to the program, please read the program guide. Please understand the eligible versus ineligible expenses for this program. And please have a look at the other information in there. There's lots of valuable information in the FAQs as well. So those are available on our IDEA Fund website that will be posted in the chat. You can reach out to me if you have any questions. After we open up the floor, we will post my email in the chat that you can reach out to me. I know many people on the call also have direct contacts at a regional innovation center. Those folks can help you out too. And then apply to IDEA Fund. If you're hesitating to apply and you think your business might be eligible and you meet the eligibility criteria, please apply. If you can dedicate the time to the application form, and we'd be happy to review your application at that time. So now I'm going to move to open Q&A, and I think I will leave the slides open just in case I need to navigate back and forth and people want to see something in particular. So I'm going to lean on my colleagues on the call to get people to ask their question or read it from the chat box. We're going to rotate back and forth. So we'll do a chat box and we'll do a hand raised, and then we'll do a chat box and a hand raised, and we'll get to as many as possible. So I will leave that. Take it away, Diana and Adelaide.
Yes, thank you very much, Jordan. Awesome info session so far. So yeah, just as Jordan said, we're going to swap back and forth. So I'm going to ask on behalf of the raised hands, and my awesome colleague Adelaide is going to ask questions in the chat. And what we're going to do is we are going to scroll back to the beginning of the chat and get to those questions as well. So Adelaide, did you want to start us off with the first question in the chat?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana. So the first question I see here is, what percentage of the equity of the company has to be owned by underrepresented groups for that 25% match?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. And it's an interesting question because people have probably been familiar with other applications that there is a percentage ownership that those self-identifying groups need to have. For IDEA Fund, they do not have to have majority ownership of the company. So if you're an underrepresented founder and you're on the founder team for your business, you can self-identify if you're the person participating in this project, and you do not have to have a certain percentage of ownership on your business. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, Valerie, would you like to unmute yourself? And if you're comfortable, you can turn on your video and ask Jordan your question.
Yeah, my video is not working, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
no
hear you,
problem.
and that's okay.
Okay, yeah. My question is, Jordan made a comment about some businesses at their core is, inclusion and green recovery, climate, etc., like the focus of this program. Now, and then some will include that, to their existing ideas just in order to meet this program. Now, oftentimes businesses that at their core are really is the focus of inclusion and diversity and climate and stuff like that. Oftentimes they're not the most scalable or revenue generating, but their impact in terms of the goals of inclusion and climate goals are higher. So how is that accounted for in terms of picking who gets funded and who is scored like on their applications in terms of scalability or success rate? Because it's like a different view of success. You know what I mean? Like it's not always monetary. Sometimes it could be in terms of the impact of the actual goals of the program.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Valerie. So I'll answer it kind of in a roundabout way, hopefully, and you can let me know if it doesn't answer your question. But applications are scored based on several different criteria that you'll be able to see in our rubric, and it's kind of an average of how you hit all of those boxes. So you don't necessarily have to be revenue generating right now. We've had lots of pre-revenue companies participate, but it does emphasize the impact that this seed funding could have on your business in particular. So if you are a smaller pre-revenue company right now, and this seed funding could have impact for you to achieve your business goals. So for example, if you are a business that's who provides a climate change solution and you're earlier staged, if you communicate that on your application, then that's how you'll be scored. So you'll see on the rubric that there are sections that consider job growth, since this is the Jobs and Growth Fund. There's the environmental question and that piece, and there's impact for seed funding. So successful applications from cohort 1 kind of hit different boxes there. There were few applications that hit and scored maximum on every single section, and most of the successful applicants kind of answered those questions on an average. So some questions, some had lower environmental impact, higher job growth. Some had the opposite of that. Some had bigger impact for seed funding than others. And since each application is scored with the same rubric and the same review team at each center, the possibility for success is kind of equal depending on how you answer those questions on the application form. Does that help, Valerie?
Yeah, that's great. And it's good to know that success has been broadened based on typically it's usually based on revenue and, typical growth. But it's good to know that the definition's kind of been broadened, because typically when you're targeting, say, to make an impact for disabled people or marginalized people, a lot of times you don't fit that traditional definition of growth and revenue. So it's really good to hear that you guys seem to have an expanded definition of what success is.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Next question.
All right, so this is a two-part question asking, are we eligible to apply even if we are part of a program at Haltech, to give the example of Acceleration Plus? And can we link the funds from this program to another fund?
Great questions. I'll answer the first question. First, each regional innovation center has their own process and rules around how many programs you can participate at one time. I'm not sure what Haltech looks like. At Innovation Guelph, clients participate in one program at a time, just due to, especially with i.d.e.a. fund, how much time commitment is required. So if you were with Innovation Guelph, your other program would be paused, or we'd have that discussion internally if you were accepted. So get in touch with Haltech first and see what their process is around that. But it's a good question. Second part of your question, jobs and growth funds, which is what the seed funding comes through for this program through FedDev, are not stackable with other jobs and growth funds. So that's the only consideration you have to have here. So if you're getting funding from another source that is jobs and growth funding, you cannot use it to match the funds for this program. If you're getting funding and you're not sure what their funding source is, check with the person you've got the funds from, check with that organization to ensure that A, it's not jobs and growth funding, and B, they know what you're using that funding for, which would be to match this program. So just be as transparent as possible with the other funding body. And as long as it's not jobs and growth funding, you're okay for i.d.e.a fund.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Steeson. Matthew, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask Jordan your question.
Hey, hi guys. Thank you. I'm from Loop Parking, and it was like a great info session. Thank you, Jordan. So I have like two questions. So one would be, so since we are a parking startup, the green impact, does it have to be like a direct impact, or can it be more like a indirect impactful project?
That's a good question. And it's actually a good reminder for me to mention that one of the downloads available to you before you start your application on that page on SM Apply is an environmental indicator matrix that provides lots of examples on what your green impact could look like. So when you ask, does it need to be a direct impact? Not necessarily. It could look a little bit different. You could be improving efficiencies at your organization. You could be reducing your environmental impact, and it could have impacts later, but you could be making those solutions and changes to your business now. So check out that matrix. It's on the SurveyMonkey Apply site, and it provides a lot of examples of what your impact could look like. That would be kind of an appropriate impact for this application. Yeah, that's a good question.
And I'm actually right now in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay.
And does this come to the Gulf region? And also, does all founders need to be participate in the cohort as well?
Oh, so you're in Kitchener and you want to make sure you can participate?
Yeah.
Yep. So absolutely, Kitchener-Waterloo is considered Southern Ontario. So if you haven't worked with a center before, Kitchener-Waterloo you'd probably be assigned to Innovation Guelph for your application review just based on your county. So if you have worked with a center, you can click that somewhere else.
Awesome. And does all founders need to be participating in the cohort as well? Or else
No.
can they work on other projects?
That's a good question
No.
too. You need one primary contact. You can have more than one person participate as long as you're able to streamline communication with the program team. But it just needs at minimum one person.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Jordan.
Thank you.
Next question here in the chat. Would any costs spent in 2022 contribute towards the client matching amount?
Great question. So if you have expenses that you've incurred in 2022, they are not eligible for this program. You cannot start spending until you are accepted and approved to start spending, which will happen approximately late May, early June.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll go to Tyler. Tyler, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll see if my camera is working as well. Yeah, so quick question also on the funding side. First off, does the match funding have to be in cash or can it be in kind? And then a follow-up on that, for whichever it is, do you have to have all of that at the start of the program, or is it okay to have an equal amount to what you're receiving at each step of the way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, great question, Tyler. Has to be in cash. There's several different ways you can kind of provide proof. So you could have the cash, you could have a bank statement for us, you could have a line of credit, you could have a letter from your bank confirming that you have those funds available. That would all be communicated if you were accepted, and you do have to have it up front. So part of the acceptance process and our due diligence process is us seeing that you can not only match the funds, but also keep up with operating costs, because we wouldn't want this project to strap anyone too thin for cash and not be able to keep up with their operating costs. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome, no problem.
Going back to the question here in the chat, I believe this is about eligibility criteria, asking if employees are required to be full-time.
Not necessarily. So the eligibility employee piece is less than 500 employees, including part-time and full-time. So if you have a massive enterprise that has more than that, you're probably not eligible. In terms of the job creation that it'll ask you about, that you're scored against. So will this project lead to job creation? There are opportunities for you to say if it's permanent or temporary job creation, or part-time or full-time. So you can articulate that on the application form. Yeah, not necessarily permanent full-time employees. Good question.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll go to Joel. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the session. Very well done, like someone else has put in the chat. The question is, one of the things that usually we struggle in application processes is to really understand what the funding agency is really after. What is it that will really make the reviewers excited? And sustainability, green reduction of greenhouse gases are amazing subjects. We work directly with some of those, but I would like to understand what is that's the first, second, and third goals of this program for the federal funder and for the RICs, whether it's growth, the main component, or whether it's job creation, or what is that? If you can clarify, that will help a lot to position the application properly.
Sure, Joel. Awesome question. So I can first and foremost say that the funders, since we are distributing the funds through Innovation Guelph, and some of the centers administer the funds themselves, our goals for the program align with FedDev's goals. So those, we have the same goals, and the application review process takes place at the Regional Innovation Center level. In terms of what you should be most prioritizing on your application, take a look at that rubric. Those are the exact questions you're scored against. So everything you mentioned is on there: job growth, green recovery, seed funding impact. There's also some more information on there about, have you completed an appropriate budget? Have you completed a business model canvas? So you'll see how those are graded as well. Everything you mentioned is equally important, but again, as I said earlier, each applicant will have a higher emphasis on one or the other. It's not the expectation. I mean, some businesses will come through and score really high on multiple rubric sections, but some will be higher on others and then medium in others. And it just depends on how their the score that their application gets kind of stacks up against other applications that we receive. So it's a good question. If you have questions about your project in particular that you're intending to apply with, let's connect offline. Let's have a conversation over email or a phone call, and we can make sure that you're fully prepared to kind of complete those application questions. I'd be more than happy to do that. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Joel.
Next question in the chat is asking, are nonprofits eligible to apply?
Oh, that's a good question as well. I actually don't know if I have the answer to that question. Are nonprofits eligible to apply? Because we have different requirements based on incorporation requirements. I think, Adelaide, if you can collect that person's info for me, and I will get back to them as soon as possible tomorrow with an answer.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Adelaide, did you want to ask another chat question then?
Yes, please. The next question here is, are costs related to inventory like shipping and import duties eligible expenses?
Overall, yes. So when you complete your budget and when you kind of think about the activities that you'll be using the seed funding for, if that's a cost that's directly related to your project, meaning I'm making these purchases for things I'm importing for the i.d.e.a fund, these costs will be incurred because of this project, then yes. If these are regular operating costs that you were already going to incur that aren't necessarily exclusive to your project, then probably not. But you wouldn't be graded on the rubric based on costs like that. So if you put on your budget, we are going to buy product from the United States and import it for this program, we wouldn't be at the application level, we won't be looking deep into, oh, is everything with that activity, could that be eligible? Because there's ways that we can communicate that and help you work through that if you were accepted to the program. So overall, I'd say yes, if it was part of your project.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll go to Tanya. Tanya, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. I do have a question in regards to the mentor meetings. So we're also located in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, and I'm wondering if the mentor meetings will be virtual or you have to be going into like Innovation Guelph in this case.
That's a great question, Tanya. So I can speak to what we do at i.d.e.a. I know it's very similar at all of the regional innovation centers. So most of what we do is virtual and we offer virtual options. We do a lot of work remotely. That said, we do have lots of mentors who love to connect in person and can make that accommodation for you if you want to see them in person. So if you applied to the program and said, I prefer most of my meetings in person, I work better, we would just get you set up with somebody that could do that. But most of the time, our default now is virtual meetings and remote meetings because that's kind of how we're working. And that's kind of how the world has shifted. Either way, whatever you need, we could set that up for mentorship for sure.
Okay, sounds good. I have one other quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
So I know that the projects have to focus on green recovery, so creating a new product or service. And ours focuses more on food security. So it's like a little bit different, but maybe I could connect with you later to ask a few more questions related to the project and how we could kind of bridge that gap.
I think that would make sense. I'd be happy to have a call offline, Tanya, and we could kind of talk about it. And even if your project's not directly related on making that positive environmental impact, it could be included as part of what you're doing anyways. It could be kind of included in your business. So maybe that's the case. So let's connect offline. You'll have my email in the chat box and we can set that up.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Next question from the chat. How many companies will be accepted in this cohort?
Good question. So we're accepting 240 companies overall between cohorts 1 and 2, and 117 participated in the last cohort. So it does depend, the fine numbers depend on how much seed funding companies are requesting. So if we have 2 companies requesting $15,000, then we can take in 2, or if we have 1, then we would just take in 1 at the $30,000 mark. So it's approximately 120, give or take a few.
Okay, thank you very much. Adelaide, I know you've got a lot more questions in your chat. Do you want to ask one more while we're here?
Absolutely. Next question. Can we apply for more than one project as a single organization?
No, good question. And no, you get $30,000 to execute one project. If your project is a 2-parter and you're asking for $30,000 to do 2 separate kind of projects that are related to each other, then maybe we can talk. Depending on how you articulate that, but you can't do 2 $30,000 projects, or 2 projects with the matching component. You can't get the $30,000 twice.
Great, thank you. Jacob, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. One thing that was unclear so far is if Toronto is considered part of this program. It is Southern Ontario, but I know that none of these RICs are.
Yep.
in
Yeah, good question, Jacob. Toronto is absolutely included. GTA is included. It's pretty much what I've kind of been telling people is the Ottawa Valley line down. If you see on our maps, that's what's included. So on the program guide, there are direct maps and also on SM Apply. Toronto is supported. If you haven't worked with one of us before, then you'll be sorted randomly to one of the regional innovation centers.
Okay, great. And does the underrepresented co-founder need to be the one that attends all of the program commitments, or can that be someone else on the co-founding team or spread out across the different members?
A good question as well. It can be spread out across, depending on making sure we have a streamlined communication with a kind of a central person. It sounds a little situational specific, so connect with me if you're unsure, but more than one person at a business can kind of connect with their mentor and connect with the program team. That's pretty typical of other regional innovation center programming as well, just because different people might need different kinds of mentorship depending on what your role on the leadership team looks like. So the answer is kind of yes and no, depending on what your founder team looks like, and how well you can communicate with us as well.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
No problem.
All right, I'll proceed with questions in the chat as we don't see any hands raised currently.
Okay.
Next question is, what if the company is in the process of building a prototype and requires funds to build it?
Prototype development is an eligible expense. It would fall under R&D. So that's in our program guide. You can see that there. So as long as the other funds that are within there are eligible, so you're under your cap for salary and cap expense, we can talk about that as well. There is kind of a blurred line in terms of when you're spending money on capital expenditures versus things necessary to create a prototype. We can always have that conversation offline too, because sometimes it could fall into either category. And that would kind of be something we talk about if you were accepted anyways. We could just make sure that the funds are eligible, but absolutely welcome to apply to the program if you're creating a new prototype.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, do we qualify as an Ontario-based company if our operations are in Uganda, but our funding team and management occurs in Ontario?
Also a good question, sounds a little situational specific. We've had similar situations with people applying from other provinces in Ontario. The money needs to be spent from Ontario. You have to have your core business operations out of Ontario. So if it was the case where your foundership team was just located in Ontario, but your business operations are still taking place elsewhere, you would not be eligible for the program.
Next question, for businesses located in Peterborough, Ontario, which regional innovation center will handle applications, and is there a contact that we can get in touch with?
In that case, it is random. It's not a county that's supported directly by a certain regional innovation center. So it would be a random assortment, and that's only determined once you click submit on your application. It's assigned then. You would have a contact after if you wanted feedback. If you didn't make it into the program and you wanted feedback, we'd put you in touch with that regional innovation center at that time. And of course, you'd be contacted if you were accepted into the program by that center as well. But I can't say for sure at this point.
Next question here. Is the Harvest/Coil Accelerate program considered a separate program? In brackets, are we eligible for this round of the i.d.e.a program if we received funding through the COIL program?
Yes, you are eligible. You'd have to check with COIL specifically. I know COIL is a program we offer through Innovation Guelph as well. So you'd have to check that the funds you received there, I'm not sure if you're asking if you can use the funds here, but if you've just participated, you're absolutely eligible. It is a fully separate program from COIL.
Great. Next question. If we would like to launch our product on Kickstarter/crowdfunding during the project period, would contracting a company to help develop this strategy fit under the eligibility activity of establishment of business operations, i.e. marketing and branding strategy?
Yep, absolutely. If that was a part of your project and you were accepted, then that could be something you could spend the money on for sure. Just communicate that on your application as well. But that if you, on your budget, you could put contracting company, like exactly what Adelaide just read. That's perfect. No problem.
Adelaide, do you want to ask one more question and then we can get to Valerie?
Sounds good. Next question from the chat. Where exactly can we find the rubric for evaluation?
Good question. When you log into SM Apply, so after you've created your account and you log in, there's two different places you'll see it. You'll see it on the main page after you navigate to the program. It's a huge list of like available application download links. The rubric is in there. You'll see to download our rubric, click here. And then when you click, you can download it. If you absolutely cannot find it, let me know and I'll get it for you. But it's on SM Apply right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jordan. Valerie, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. This is more of a statement than a question, but I just wanted, I guess for inclusiveness sake, mention that the application opening date from March 24th to April 17th is rather short. It's less than a month. And in terms of a barrier, when you're looking at groups that are underrepresented, specifically disabled people, that's a really tight time frame for a lot of people with disabilities. And I'm sure you ladies here that are presenting don't necessarily have control over that, but you know, when you interface with the people that set out these programs, you can mention that can be actually a very severe barrier to people with disabilities being able to participate in these grant proposals. And I find that it's very common for the timeframes to be very short from a disabled person's perspective.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for letting us know, Valerie. You're right in that we haven't had control over the application opening deadlines. They've been very funder prescribed, but you're also correct in that we can offer that feedback at that level. So we'll take note of that and we will make sure that's communicated. Thank you for letting us know and sharing that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Adelaide, we'll go to you.
Okay, next question in the chat. We have 2/3 of our founders that fall into underrepresented groups, but I am not, and I want to be the point person in the program. Are we 1-to-1 or 25%?
By definition, you would be 25%. Because it's a founder team requirement. Again, I mentioned there's no percent ownership that is the requirement, but yeah, you would.
Wonderful, thank you. Next, we'll go to Dwight.
Hi, Hi, thank you for your information. I was filling out the application a little bit earlier, and I had clicked confirm, but I haven't completed the whole application. I realized there's a couple of points that I wanted to add to when I was just reviewing it again. But when I click on edit, it doesn't let me edit all the fields. Is that expected behavior, or am I doing something wrong?
That would only be if you submitted the application. So Dwight, if I could ask you to send me an email, I can troubleshoot it for you and I can make sure that you can open those sections back up and edit them.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Next question from the chat. Does the job creation from the product need to happen within the project timeframe, or can it be scoped for a future timeframe?
It's a good question. You'll see that the rubric considers the project timeframe, but you're welcome to communicate future job creation on the application as well. But the job creation that we're considered with is in the short term, and it's within the project timeframe.
Thank you. Next question. Would an invoice related to the project from overseas be acceptable as an eligible cost?
Yep, great question. We will accept invoices if you're working with contractors, if you're working with agencies that are outside of Canada. We will accept invoices that are from elsewhere for sure, as long as your business operations happen in Southern Ontario. But we know a lot of people are working with mentors and other organizations, freelancers that aren't in Southern Ontario or even in Canada, and that's fine.
Great, thank you. Next question in the chat. Can we apply as a consortium? We are a circular economy, so we'll use this program to find strategic partnerships in Southern Ontario.
It's another situational specific question that I would need a little bit more information for. So I will ask that we take it offline and you send me an email with some more information so I can properly answer it. Thank you.
Next question in the chat. Can you explain the rubric again? How are the points calculated?
Sure. So the rubric on the website, on the SM Apply site, has several different sections. There's 10 sections in total. You'll notice that the top section of the rubric is weighted from 1 to 4, and then the bottom questions are more project specific and they're rated from 3 to 6. So you'll see that's how the scores are calculated, and you'll see the exact specific sections that it's talking about on the rubric there. That's kind of how your scores will be based on, and you'll be able to see which application sections align with the rubric that way.
Next question in the chat. Are women part of an underrepresented group?
It's a great question. So women on their own are not considered underrepresented for this program. That is funder prescribed. I know that looks a lot different than other programs, and it's not something we had control over. If you are a woman who identifies in one of those other underrepresented groups, then of course, but women as their own category are not.
Next question from the chat here. If we are pre-revenue with no payroll yet, we are in R&D, can our matching be 1-to-1 or be in sweat equity?
It has to be cash, it has to be 1-to-1 in that case. So in-kind contributions are unfortunately not an eligible matching source.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I'm seeing in the chat box so far.
Awesome. We are ahead of schedule, which I did not anticipate with the volume of people on the call. So if you haven't asked your question yet, please feel free. But if you don't have any questions, feel free to hop off and have a couple minutes back in your day. I'll remind everyone, maybe some questions are percolating. There will be a recording of this session posted on the i.d.e.a Fund website. Diana will post a link in the chat by this Friday. So you'll see right now there's a link to our last year's info session. This info session will be posted by this Friday, March 31st, I think. And you'll see it there. And then also will be a link to my email in the chat box. And I do appreciate everyone's patience. I'm thinking I'll get a couple emails after our info session today. So please give me at least 2 business days to reply. And we can go from there. But if other questions come up after and you're not able to make it to one of our other info sessions, don't feel like you need to. It'll be the same content covered. Just send me an email and we can have a conversation. Any questions that have popped up?
There was an email or a question that had come to me from Tom. Tom had asked, does the project you are developing have to be completed by November of 2023?
That's correct, yes. November 30th, 2023 is the last possible day that you can incur project expenses and complete your project. That is funder prescribed. So we're time contingent for our funding envelope for this program, and that's when you need to complete your project in order for us to be able to get you your money.
I'm just seeing a question that has popped into the chat asking, what age are youth considered?
Youth considered, so just to clarify, youth are not an underrepresented group for this program. And on the application form, you'll see 2 different questions that ask about youth ownership. And there's one that asks if you're under 40, and there's another that asks if you're under 30. Each organization defines youth differently. Those questions are asked on the application form because we have other opportunities that we might be able to share with you because you are or not youth founded, but they don't impact your eligibility and they don't impact your ability to see one of the 2 different budget types.
Just seeing another question here. Does immigrated Indians considered as underrepresented?
If you identify in one of the 5 groups, so newcomers to Canada is not one of the underrepresented groups, but if you do identify in one of the other ones, so Black, Indigenous, person of color, person with a disability, or LGBTQ2+, then you would be, if that is your situation.
A new question has just popped in.
No problem.
When will winners be announced?
Good question. So fund recipients will be announced by late May. We are going to do our best to contact unsuccessful applicants as early as possible. I know that there was a considerable amount of time last time, and that's just due to the nature of how many applications we receive. So we received about 380 last time. We had to review them all based on the same rubric, so we do need some time. So applications close April 17th. We need some time to get those reviews in and make sure that we can contact our recipients. Announced publicly, not until summer 2023, this coming summer. You will be informed privately if you're a winner much sooner than that.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question from someone that's directly messaged me. Does the company maintain 100% control of the project IP?
Yes, absolutely. So if you have IP that's created in the project, that is 100% yours.
Great, thank
Good,
you.
great question. That's a good question.
Absolutely. Question has just come in here asking what is considered a person of color?
So that's also a good question. It is a self-identification. We are not a certifying body through Innovation Guelph or any of the regional innovation centers, so we can't define that for you. We can put you in touch with certifying bodies if you're interested in learning what official definitions are of any of those groups. But if you self-identify as a person of color, you will not be asked to prove it, if that helps.
Related to that question is a request to go back to the slide defining underrepresented groups.
It doesn't define them. So the underrepresented groups are Black, Indigenous, person of color, LGBTQ2+, and persons with a disability. But we don't provide a definition for any of those groups. Again, we're not at liberty to do that. We're not a certifying body. The purpose of asking the question is just to provide a separate budget so you can match the funds at a decreased amount.
Another question here in the chat asking, applying from which center has more of a chance of success?
That's a good question. There's no center that you could apply to that you'd have a greater chance of success. Each center uses, while each center has their own review committee, they each use the exact same rubric and are scoring the applications in the same way. And we've done that to remove as much bias as possible. But it's an interesting question.
A new question has come in asking, to foster inclusion, businesses need to comply with i.d.e.a legislation. What digital accessibility mentoring is available to recipients? How much of the budget is allocated to special needs to accommodate?
It's a good question as well. So if we don't check that a component of a business's project is to implement i.d.e.a compliance, that would be on the business's due diligence side. That said, if they were applying with a project to help them implement i.d.e.a accessible material or be compliant, we would do our best to find the right mentor to work with them who has that expertise level.
A couple more questions have come in. The first one asking, do we need to connect with a regional innovation center rep before we apply?
Nope. Good question. You do not have to connect with a rep before you apply. You're welcome to. If you are interested in who the contact would be at the Regional Innovation Center in your particular county, I can answer that for you. You can get in touch with me, but it's not necessary. We will be reviewing applications based on the rubric only. So your previous history and connection with the Regional Innovation Center is not on the rubric, and we review the content of your application only. So you don't have to have familiarity with us before applying.
Great, thank you. And the last question I'm seeing right now is asking, does each center have a cap on the number of approved applications?
So it's based on how much seed funding. So each center per cohort has roughly the same amount of seed funding. And based on cohort 1, some companies took less than the maximum and some took the maximum. So for example, at Innovation Guelph, if we have companies that are asking, if we had 2 companies that were asking for $15,000, we would be able to take both of them if they were successful, rather than one who asked for $30,000. So it just depends on if the application is successful and how much they're asking for in seed funding. So if it just kind of depends on that. So it'll be give or take 20 per regional innovation center. But there's no, the maximum is due to the seed funding only. And then the amount of seed funding we have in total. So only 240 people can receive $30,000 total in the program from cohorts 1 and 2 across all centers.
Those are all the questions in the chat.
Okay, we're at 4:57. So I feel as though in the interest of everyone's time, we can probably wrap the call. I want to thank everyone for joining today. I want to thank you for dedicating the time to come and chat with me and ask questions. If you have questions that come up after this call, send me an email. That's probably the best place because the info sessions that are to come after this will be the same format. There'll be lots of folks joining, lots of back and forths. And especially if you have a situational question like my project looks like this, I need some help, that's best answered one-on-one anyway. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you to my colleagues, Diana and Adelaide. Wouldn't have been able to kind of streamline communications without you. And thanks so much to our ASL interpreters from Assign. Keep an eye out for the recording of this on our IDEA Fund website by this Friday. And otherwise, I will be in touch with those who email me. So I'll keep the call on for a couple minutes just for people to collect that information from the chat. But otherwise, have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see your applications come in.